Well, welcome back. We talked about how you can use a bottomless portafilter to diagnose your problems to assure there's consistency. Let's go ahead and demonstrate that. So we're going to do 3 extractions. First one is going to be what hopefully is a correct one. The second one is going to be one where I'll intentionally make a mistake. And then the third one, we'll turn the wheel over to you and give you a chance to try it and see what happens.
Cool.
Great. Okay, so remember we talked about consistency. One thing you can do is arrange your workspace such that it reminds you to do things. For example, put your brush on the drip trace. You remember to scrub it and flush beforehand. Put your towel where you use for wiping the basket here to remind you to dry it correctly. Those are different ways you can give yourself sort of visual reminders to do these sort of things. So I'm going to do a quick flush like that and a brush. Dry that off. Because we haven't done this for a while, we're going to go ahead and discard that old coffee. So we're starting out with a nice fresh one. Okay, I intentionally overfill this a little bit because I'm going to do a strike across. I want to make sure it comes out nice and even. But you'll notice that I create kind of a little bit of a lump there, right? One typical newbie mistake is that when they dose, they don't necessarily dose evenly. So as I was dosing, I was trying to hit the different quadrants of the portafilter so I wouldn't have to disturb it. Because the powder, the coffee powder, is very easy to compress. And so you can inadvertently create different densities by manipulating the coffee after it's hit the portafilter. We're going to talk about what that sort of consequence will demonstrate.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and strike across. I'll just use this. Duck like that. Now I'm going to do a little bit of pre-infusion here, 6 seconds or so. Roll that across.
And the pre-infusion is something that you typically aren't doing on a regular espresso machine. You just press the button.
Some of them have built-in pre-infusion.
Okay.
Some of them have ones that you can control manually.
Okay.
And others are, are programmable.
Okay.
Okay, so that was number 1, and we'll wait until we see the video to see how well it did. But let's go ahead and give that a taste.
It's pretty darn good.
Pretty darn good. Well, let's see. Let me check it out.
Okay.
I didn't even look at it as it was pouring, but I could tell it was a little on the uneven side.
Uneven?
Yeah, it was.
Just because where the flow was
Yeah,
coming?
I think it was a little on the uneven side. And part of it might have been is that we took a break, and during the break, sometimes you get variance because of the amount of coffee. I tried to account for that. Sometimes it's just espresso gremlins.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to be necessarily, every shot is not necessarily a beauty shot.
Yeah.
The question is ultimately what matters is how is the taste.
Yeah.
And for this one,
I'd say it's pretty good.
this is Toscano,
Uh-huh.
and I would describe this as chocolate and like roasted pecans. It's a little bit more roasty than what I remember it last time we tried it. That's probably because most people serve this as a cappuccino.
Okay.
And so, but you're right though. It's pretty much spot on. Could be a little bit better, but hey, we're gonna give it a second time. This time we're gonna intentionally make a mistake.
Okay.
And, almost forgot, right? There we go. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make that mistake I was talking about a newbie would do. You see how I loaded it really heavy in the back?
Yep.
And I'm exaggerating this for this demonstration. And then instead of striking straight across, like I typically would, trying to put no pressure, I'm going to kind of flatten as I go down.
Okay.
And you can see, if I go like that, okay, what this has done now is it looks nice and level and all well and good.
But you're compressing a lot of
Right.
areas. Yeah.
And if you want, you can go ahead and take a peek at this so you can see what I'm talking about. Go ahead and bend down for that. We'll both take a shot. And you see that this one's got a little bit of dead space right here. You see? You see how it's kind of curling around, such like that?
Yeah, in the middle there too. Seems like there it goes.
You can also see that it's blonding earlier.
Yeah.
You see? So what happened there is we'll cut that off. We cut that off at, well, it was getting up to about 30 seconds, so it wasn't too bad. But you can kind of see is that by using a bottomless portafilter, you can see if there's a dead spot, which typically points to some sort of density issue.
Okay.
Right? So you can. Now it's your turn. We'll go ahead and switch places, and we'll give the same thing. Oh, I want to give that a taste as well.
It's good.
Still good?
A little more on the bitter side.
Well, the thing is that with a lot of espresso blends that are commercially made, the fact of the matter is they're pretty forgiving. And so, you might not, this might be in a happy medium sort of thing. Yeah. But as you get into a more demanding espresso, the edge is much finer, and thus it'll swing
more precise.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of times when I suggest newbies get started, I always tell them start out with a friendly blend that doesn't that will give you good results. So that way you're encouraged to continue versus picking some difficult, more challenging espresso and getting discouraged.
And I'm assuming you have a list of those friendly blends.
Right, and in fact, usually a safe bet is that whatever a roaster uses for their bar blend, they're serving that to most of their commercial accounts, and their commercial accounts, they may have baristas whose skills are all over the map, and thus they'll make a blend that is temperature tolerant, extraction tolerant, the idea. But the ones they might sell to aficionados is going to be, it's going to have a much finer edge on temperature and extraction and whatnot.
Gotcha.
Let's go ahead and switch places.
All right. And I just do the same thing.
Do the same thing. Now I already flushed and I already scrubbed the group head for you, so you're ready to go.
All right, so that part's been done.
Yep.
My visual cue there. So I'm going to dry this out. And then I'm going to discard some of this. Now this is the first time I've used this grinder. So.
Right, and actually, remember that discard part is really only necessary at the beginning of a session.
Right.
Since
coffee, we just used it. That's what I was going to ask you. You don't really have to do that.
No.
Okay.
No,
if it's just been sitting for a while.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if you pull a shot within the last, 5 or 10 minutes, I don't think anyone is going to really complain about that. But if it's been several hours or worse yet, an entire day, you really need to purge it.
Okay, so I got that, and then there's a little switch over here somewhere.
Yep, go ahead, hit the switch.
On the bottom?
Twist. Wow, well, that's fine,
Again.
That's fine. Now, I kind of set you up on this. Because some people might be saying, this is a doser versus a doserless grinder.
Yeah.
I believe that you've had a doserless grinder.
Correct. I just hit the button, it pours out, and then I move the little tray around to try to get it coming out equally.
So this was kind of a setup.
Okay.
But what you're doing is that normally this is used in a bar with dozens of people, and the doser is used to a portion, hence the name doser.
Okay.
Is that normally you'd fill it up like halfway in an Italian cafe, and then they just pull the handle once because they're doing shot after shot. They're continuously doing it.
Yeah.
But here, since we're doing a much lower volume, we're using the doser for a different purpose. We aren't using it to meter out a certain amount. What we're using it is to agitate the coffee grinds.
Okay.
Remember how we were talking about getting an even distribution?
Yeah.
Well, one way you can do that is that that whack, 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 whack back and forth.
Yeah.
What that's doing is it's bringing just a little bit of coffee each time into the portafilter. So as you do that, you'll be able to say where it lands.
Okay.
And that makes for a much even distribution. If you're using a doserless grinder, it depends on the grinder. Some of them will do a nice little layout. You could pretty much just hold it in the center. Other ones, they might kind of, almost extrude the coffee grinds.
Okay.
And so there you have to pay attention to where it lands in this case, So now go ahead and
And the little tool to strike off.
You can use this. You can use a grinder brush. That's fine. Okay, so simple as that. Remember to knock off the coffee off the ears of the portafilter, and then tamp away.
All right.
Yep.
Move this up here.
There you go.
And
Now move it halfway for pre-infusion. So right there,
okay,
about there.
5 seconds.
Yeah, 5 or 6 seconds,
Now go.
and then pull it across. Yours looks better than mine. So you see any dead spots, or is it pretty much even?
It looks pretty even to me.
Well, that's good. Now you see, one thing I notice is that we're already up to the 31 seconds.
This is it was a little on the slower
It
side.
was a little on the slower side.
Okay.
So what would that indicate to you?
Probably dosed too much.
Probably dosed
Yeah.
too much, right?
Yep.
And so a lot of times newbies are tempted to keep screwing with the grind setting. A lot of times, within a small margin, it's easier to change the dose, especially as in this grinder, this is a conical grinder. You probably heard the term a flat burr and a conical grinder. The conical grinders are really rather forgiving in a sense, is that the grind setting doesn't require a lot of machinations. You can pretty much get it in the first 1 or 2 tries in the ballpark, and you can tweak the dose to get a finer amount. Like that, I might have been tempted to decrease the dose by a teeny bit. So how did the taste? Now, I mean, this is a very forgiving blend. Yeah. So maybe you're not noticing as distinct a difference, but
taste is very good. I mean, I don't notice that big of a difference. And again, I'm not the high level connoisseur yet, but I mean, I can taste a level of good and bad from R1. But when I think it's somewhat relatively close, it's harder for me to differentiate.
That's fair. One thing to keep in mind is also you're dealing here with world-class gear. Right. You've got one of the best conical grinders around.
Yep.
You've got one of the best espresso machines around, and thus it's
a nice fresh roast.
And one of the best coffees around.
Yeah.
You put those three together is that it's only for you to screw up in some regard, and that's why I was suggesting before with newbies, get that forgiving sort of blend, get dialed in, get comfortable, and then you can expand on to more.
Could you? Is there a way you could comfortably rank the importance of all those elements from the most important to the least and all those different variables? So
absolutely.
And then from what I heard you said, my guess would be number 1, the roast, the espresso.
The coffee.
Number 2, the grinder.
Correct.
Number 3, the machine.
3. Oh yeah, but who's number 0? I mean, the most important is you.
Correct. Now, and of course, you being the one variable that could mess up all of them.
Correct.
But sort of taking that out. But other than user error, to try to narrow that down, would that be
that would be the exact order I would pick. When people, in fact, in our next segment, we're going to talk about buying advice, right?
Yep.
And that's the next video. And you want to get equipment that has a high forgiveness factor, what I call forgiveness factor, because if it allows a certain amount of tolerance of mistakes, the more likely you are to get a good or very good espresso.
Yep.
And especially when you're going out for a newbie. And we'll talk about this more, but ironically is people who economize on coffee and their equipment, they make their lives really frustrating.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like what was happening, you mentioned to me during the break, you were saying, this past week I picked up some stale coffee, and as a result, I was getting really frustrated. I was thinking, if I didn't know better, I might have just given up.
Absolutely.
And said, this wasn't this. I'll go back to my, my K-cup and Starbucks and be done with it. So, again, this is an idea of having those consistent elements.
Yep.
It makes it much more easier to recover.
Awesome.
So there we go. Any last comments before we go?
No, that's good.
Well, it's been a great session so far. We're going to do now, after this, we're going to do some buying advice, and that'll wrap up the newbie introduction to espresso.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.